Now in this video, I want to show you something called Gizmos. And we've already talked about various gizmos where you can have different gizmos in your scene. You can go up here and you can change how they display, things like that, the size. But we're going to talk about actually creating our own gizmos this time. So in the last video, we added this diamond here to show the location of where our ground check is. This time we're going to make our own custom gizmo for that. So I'm just going to select that ground check item. I'm going to set it back to no icon. So now if I uncheck, we don't see anything. Let's go into our player controller and let's add a new method here called onDrawGizmos. So now this gets called all the time in Unity. So we're going to see this in our scene and only in our scene. So this doesn't actually show up to the player at all or the user. It's only going to show up while we're working on it. It's just to help us. So there's a lot of different stuff we can do with gizmos. I'm going to keep this very basic. But the first thing, so we can do gizmos.color, and then we can tell it the color we want for the gizmo. So for this one, I'm going to do, maybe I'll do color yellow. So we'll make it a yellow one. Now we can do gizmos again, and then we can type draw, and you can see all these different options we get. So we could draw a cube, an icon, a line, a mesh, a sphere. So we have a whole pile of options here. I think the one that makes the most sense here is a sphere. So we just want to see a circle. So I'm going to select that. Now the first thing it wants is the center of it. So just like we did with our overlap circle, we want to use the exact same thing. So I'm going to use the ground check transform.position. And then for the radius, we want this radius as well. And if we're using it in more than one spot, we're probably going to want to turn that into a variable right away. Because if we change it in one spot and we forget to change in the other, they're not going to align. But let's try this out first and let's make sure this works. Now notice we see this circle here. So this is showing us the actual size of our ground check. So anything within this circle, if it has a layer of ground, this means we're going to be considered is grounded. So now we don't really have to do the play testing where we trial and error what size we want. We could visually see it now. So let's do that and make a quick variable. So I want to keep the things grouped together of what makes the most sense. So this is part of our ground check. So I'm going to put it right around here. I'm going to make it a serialized field. And this is going to be a float value. And we'll call this ground check radius. And right now I'll set it to 0.15f. That's what we used. And now let's replace this value here with ground check radius. Okay, so now you're going to notice if we go in here and we start changing this, it changes on the fly. So now we can customize it however we want. So that looks a little big even. I'm going to do like maybe 0.1. This looks like it should be fine. So let's run our game and make sure this works well. All right, that seems a lot better. And one thing we could, if we wanted, we could implement a cooldown for our jump. So when we land, we can't instantly jump again. I don't think we need that for our game, but if you want to try adding that yourself, by all means, go ahead. Now that I have this working though, I'm just going to modify my game a little bit here. So currently this platform's too high for me to jump on. So this is where game design starts coming into play. I could either decide I want my player to have a higher jump, or I can move the platform so the player can actually jump on them. So in this case, I am going to move the platform. I think that player jump is already pretty big. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to start adding some more. So I'm going to duplicate this one. I'll add it, say, maybe down here. Duplicate it again. We got to go up here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to even duplicate this moving platform. So we currently have this one. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to put another one over here. And then I'll put one more platform up higher where we have to go up. So let's try this out. And this is where you get to be creative. Start making your level and build it up a little bit. Have some fun with it. So now we're starting to get a bigger level. We have to wait. And okay, so that platform didn't go low enough. So we have to lower this moving platform a bit. Now I have to go all the way over here. I could have dragged my player closer. But now, okay, so I could make that, and then I could go up here. So we can already see that not being able to tell how high and low these moving platforms go, because currently if we look at it, we just have a distance to stop. We would have to kind of eyeball and play around. So that's not a very good way. So in the next videos, we're going to work on improving that as well. In this video, we're going to start talking about physics materials. So as we run the game right now, we notice that if we were to jump on the side of a platform and we continue to hold to the right, we stick to it. Now the reason this is happening is because of physics and friction. So we don't want friction with our player. If you had a really physics-based game where that came into play, obviously you would want it. But in a platformer, we just want things to fall. So if we look on both our rigid body and the capsule collider, we have an option here for a material. And it shows in the description here, it says physics material 2D. In our project folder down below here, we can go to right click, create, then go to 2D, and you see we have physics material 2D. We can create a material here, and I'm just going to call this no friction. Now when it's selected, you can see we have two options here. We have friction and we have bounciness. So if you were making a game where you did want a player to bounce off objects, or say you had a rock and you wanted it to bounce or something, we would add a bounce material. In this case, we don't want either. So we're going to set 0 for both friction and bounciness. And now if we select the player, we can drag this on. In this case, we could drag it into either the capsule or the rigid body, but I'm going to go with the capsule collider here. Now, if we run the game, let's try the same thing here. Now I'm holding the right and I fell right off the screen. I couldn't stick to it. So in this case, we added it right to the player's collider. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't want the player to stick to anything in this game. And we also don't want friction to really slow us down as we're moving. We already control that with our input. But say if you had a game where you did want the player to be controlled by friction, and when you stop and let go, you want friction to actually take into account. Or say if you wanted to have different platforms and each one had a different value, we could add something like an icy platform, and we could change the type of material that's on that platform to have different amounts of friction and bounciness. So for our current setup, we don't need that, so I'm just going to use the no friction material. But that's something to know about, that you can play and customize with that however you want. But in our game, even if we want to add slide and stuff, we can add it via code. So we don't really need the physics to control that.